hello, everybody, and welcome back to the General Eclectic podcast with Rod Dreer. I'm your host, Kale Zeldin, and we are here for episode number 13. Rod, good to see you as always, and we're just going to jump right into things. You were recently, one of the recent trips that you've made was to Loudoun County, Virginia, which you talked about on this very program, I think 2 or 3 episodes ago. But it would appear that Loudoun County is back in the news, and I gotta say, it's not a good look for Loudoun County. What's going on?
When I was up there, I was out in the horse country part, the semi-rural part, and I said, geez, why don't more people move here? I heard from Loudoun County residents saying, it's the most expensive county in America. But anyway, so it's a very, very prosperous county, suburban Washington. Or maybe ex-urban Washington. Anyway, there's been a lot of controversy in Loudoun County over the past few months over critical race theory coming to the public school system. A lot of fighting over this. Well, it turns out the Daily Wire broke a story this afternoon as you and I are talking about they've uncovered this Facebook group of people in Loudoun County. I think there's a school board member, other Loudoun County educational elites who were putting together a list of parents who were against critical race theory because they wanted to try to dox them and to harm them, to disable them in the fight over critical race theory. They even said, one of them even asked, are there any hackers here who can get involved? I mean, crazy stuff.
Wait. So just again, I'm coming to the story fresh. So there's a Facebook page that is filled with parents as well as people who are like on a school board or something like that.
Yeah, I think there's a school board member, some parents who are very pro CRT. Okay. But what they were trying to do was compile names, addresses, and all that of all the people who had spoken out against CRT in good faith as parents, to try to harass them and ruin them so they would stand down. Now, what's so interesting to me about this is these progressives are playing for keeps. One of them is quoted in an email that the Daily Wire reviewed. One of them is quoted as saying that I don't even feel like I have to be civil anymore to these people because they're so evil. Their rhetoric is so evil.
So the rhetoric, wrong thing.
Right. So look, these are parents who are simply standing up for, to object to what their kids are being shoved down their throats. What's so interesting to me about this, Kale, is it shows you what parents are up against. We've seen this with the trans stuff in schools, where schools have adopted transgender protocols where if a child says that he or she is trans, the school typically does not tell their parents. They keep this from the parents. This is written down in policies that have been suggested by the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network, GLSEN. So school systems are conspiring against parents to push transgenderism on children. And now in Loudoun County, there was this unofficial collaboration to discredit and disarm and intimidate parents who objected to critical race theory.
So is the school board looking to implement some sort of new CRT training program with teachers or with students, or what do you know about it?
That's my understanding is very general, but they definitely had some CRT training for teachers, and they've hired a bunch of CRT monitors to keep pushing this stuff and make sure it's infiltrating the curriculum. Sure. And they also there's this woman, Ashra Nomani, who has just been a bulldog fighting this stuff because there's a school, I think it's a magnet school in Loudoun County, that the CRT people wanted to dismantle for racial equity issues, the usual stuff.
Sure. The usual stuff.
And so Ashra Nomani and other parents have been fighting this stuff. They're like, wait a minute, you can't do this. These are our public schools. But I think the thing that just gets to me so much about it, Kale, is we are living in a time when trust in institutions is at an all-time low. Yeah. And here we have a school system in the most prosperous county in America showing itself to be completely untrustworthy. To see parents as the enemy.
Yeah, I would say it's such an interesting standpoint. I mean, I work in Catholic schools, and we talk a lot, about operating, we are sort of cooperating with the raising of children, right? I mean, that's sort of part of how we see our mission in school. And so we're collaborators, right? We are collaborating with our parents, and we talk about, look, all the time. I know I mean it. I know my colleagues mean it, that we feel, blessed to, that the parents would trust us in the work of raising and forming their kids, intellectually and morally and spiritually and all of those sorts of things. And, I know for me as a teacher, I take that very seriously. But it's fascinating to me that they would set up, or I guess maybe get outed, maybe is a better way to say it, outed as not only not collaborating with parents, but really kind of working against the parents. I mean, that's quite a Rubicon,
right,
in my way of seeing education. But I guess I'm an odd duck there. Maybe I'm the outlier. Maybe as a Catholic school teacher, I have a different frame in terms of how I understand my students and how I understand my work in relationship with the parents.
Well, I don't know that. My wife is a Christian school teacher, as you know, and she sees things the way you do. She sees the job of the school and parents is to work together for the education of the child. And I would not say that all public school teachers are like these Loudoun County people are.
Sure. Well, your sister was a public school teacher.
Yeah, and I'm sure she would never have gone for anything like this. That said, though, I think it matters that this is one of the most elite public school systems in America. On a previous episode, we talked about a piece Barry Weiss had written about parents whose kids go to these super expensive prep schools, spend like $50,000 to $70,000 a year, and the parents are disgusted with the wokeness that's being shoved down their throats. Nobody wants to say anything about it because they want their kids to be able to go to Harvard.
Yeah, there's a contract there, right? At least one that they believe they're winking and nodding in, which is, if I don't rock the boat, then I will use the school as a catapult to get my kid into some sort of secure, elite, place for education, which will give them all the opportunities.
Their ascension into the American meritocracy.
Right, and that really is, that really is, I think, the thought. I don't know if that's accurate, except for the sort of the tippy tip of the elite sphere. But nonetheless, I think that's right. I think that sounds good. Now, but so what is what is someone in this sort of Loudoun County public school setting, right? This system, why are they? I mean, what is driving them to see themselves as working against the parents?
No, it's upper middle class, rich white people, basically, and they're allies of color.
Whiteness. So more whiteness.
And there's one of the teachers, I think she was a teacher, maybe an old school board member. I'm not sure. You have to go read the story of the Daily Wire. But she was quoted as saying, Abigail Weitzkopf, I think it is. Weitzkopf is her last name. She said on her Twitter, she says that in education, if you're not a revolutionary, you're an oppressor. Yeah. They've bought into this radical ideology because it gives them a way to deal with this inchoate sense of privilege, guilt over their privilege. And so they're offloading all this by trying to tear down the school system in the name of revolution. I mean, but what I hope will happen in Loudoun County is that this will radicalize parents and make them realize these people do not have your best interest at heart, and they want your kids.
Right. What I don't understand, I agree with that. I think that's basically right. But want your kids for what? Right? I mean, what? Are they playing some sort of long game, do you think? Or
well, one of the quote from one of the emails that was on Daily Wire, they said that we have to end systemic racism. I think they really do believe that's what they're doing.
They must. Yeah, they must.
And the way to do that is to colonize the minds of the kids. it's why I posted on my blog one day last week. There was talk about this Montessori school, a charter school in D.C. That was pushing gender theory on 3 to 5 year olds. Because this is what has to be done for the cause of progress. Now, this school was doing it perfectly legally. They were doing it above board. You don't have to send your kids to this school, but just it's the idea, Kale, that this is what is now considered progress, forcing 3-year-olds to think about, am I a boy, am I a girl? I mean, that you talk about mess a kid's head up. And I just wonder. Go ahead.
Yeah, I know. Go ahead. No, I'm with
you.
No,
I'm just wondering, what is it going to take for there to be a backlash? There needs to be we're past due for a backlash, or will there be a backlash? And
I'll tell you. Well,
that's
what I'm wondering. Is there a backlash coming? I don't think so.
I don't know, because here's the thing. I was talking to these 2 young guys who came through Baton Rouge over the weekend.
Oh, good. Yeah, I was hoping you were going to bring this up.
Yeah. Both from state universities, big, prestigious state universities back east. I'm not going to name them, but they're fans of Live Not By Lies. They said it really mattered a lot to them and Benedict option. They just wanted to meet me. They were friends of a friend, so I met them. So we were just talking about school and church stuff. They're both evangelical Christians, college students. Mm-hmm. And one of the main themes of our conversation, and this is them talking to me, is that critical race theory and LGBT gender theory stuff is racing through the churches in their orbit and the Christian organizations at their colleges, because one of them said it's as simple as this. Church, for most of the people we know, church is about whatever the middle class sees as good. It's about reinforcing that and putting a little Jesus sauce on it. He didn't say that. I said that.
I love that Jesus sauce. That's
but and if the middle class sees LGBT or critical race theory as good, then our churches, our Christian organizations are going to flip, and that's what's happening. It's the church capitulating to the culture.
Well, last episode we talked about Wesley Yang's idea of a successor ideology, and was listening to a podcast. It must have been Paul Vanderklay, one of the other guys that I listened to quite a bit, and he was talking about successor religions, and there's this sort of strange sort of coming together of, the successor ideology is really a successor religion, but it's so successful because it doesn't require, it doesn't have to explicitly call itself a church or a theology. In fact, it seems to be able to do so much of its work because it does not call itself a church or a theology, right? And it reminds me of what our friend Ibram Kendi said last week that you brought up, right? That a true anti-racist theology versus a savior ideology,
revolutionary Christianity versus savior Christianity,
right? And it reminds me of the way that you hear this, especially in some progressive evangelical circles, even some progressive Catholic circles, that they use this word prophetic all the time, right? That the church must embrace its new prophetic mode, and as far as I can tell, what prophetic means is to adopt some sort of accommodationist standpoint to now we would just call it woke ideology, but it really is just a kind of neo-Marxism, right? Cultural Marxism, sort of in the Gramscian mold. Whether they acknowledge that or not seems immaterial. And in fact, it seems like the more that you don't acknowledge the true intellectual roots of this new theology, the more powerful it becomes.
Well, here's the flim-flam here. The term prophetic.
You know what I'm talking about, right? You hear this word all the time?
Yeah.
Abuse,
But the left usually says that to be prophetic is to speak truth to power.
Right, exactly. Right.
Well, and that can be intoxicating. Well, what they've done, the left, is they construe themselves as always the underdog, even though they hold all the power now.
Yeah, right? Yeah. This is so interesting. That's what you call it, flim-flam. I think that's exactly right. Keep going. Sorry.
But these young guys, these college students I was talking to, one of them, I was asking him, what is the appeal? What could possibly be the appeal of this stuff to middle class white college kids, evangelical kids. He said, listen, if you were raised as I was in church youth group, which was about nothing more than getting together, playing some games, talking with your friends, talking about your feelings, and then getting on with your life, he said, you're sick of it. He said, and if this comes to you, this critical race theory, wokeness, BLM, whatever, if it comes to you as something hard-edged, it allows you to be prophetic, it speaks truth to power, it makes demands on you, and it calls you to solidarity and to crusade against something. He goes, you fall for it if you're not willing to think about it at all, because it's finally something real. It's a lie. These guys think it's a lie, but it feels like something new to them. And these young people are just desperate for something substantive.
So in a completely unrelated vein, I was talking to our friend Steve Skojic yesterday, I think it was, and we were talking about he's sort of poor guy's pulling his hair out with his tribe.
He doesn't have a lot of hair left.
Hey, I didn't say it, Steve, just for the record. All right. But Steve is at his wit's end because of his sort of tribe, I guess, his sort of traditionalist tribe, has sort of doubled down on, a kind of anti this sort of weird, this very sort of extreme standpoint on COVID and the lockdowns and now the vaccine, right? And it strikes us both, right? As this sort of this kind of performative standpoint that it's like, this is going to be my cause. Like, I am not going to, buckle, like history sort of is living through me in this moment. And it's a weird thing, right? Because, these are a group of traditional Catholics, right? And you would think that they would have their meaning crisis sorted out already because they believe in the gospel and sort of the and all of that, right? But it's this weird moment where you're sort of downloading the kind of histrionics of woke Twitter, but you're doing it at the service of a strange, like, not even a central point. Like, what is that? Like,
I think what it is it's something that they can control, or they feel like they can control. I look at that, I'm like, this is really the hill you want to die on when so many of our young people are falling away from the church, don't believe any of it. You're going to fight about COVID vaccines? And I don't want to minimize concerns about the vaccines. I mean, I got my vaccine, but I know that there's some serious reasons to have concerns about them. But it's like the fact that they're choosing to go ape over this tells me it's not really about COVID.
So to get back, to try to connect this to the two guys who blew through town and had lunch with you the other day. So they seem to be making an argument that at least this sort of woke thing summons or plugs you into something that is potentially meaningful, like there's a cause, like that I'm not just sort of going through the motions. Is that kind of what they're doing?
I think so. And one thing they didn't bring up, but I think if we had longer to talk, I would have brought up, is the Selma envy, as I've called it.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Okay. Weird. I was just thinking about this. That's very strange. Go ahead.
Okay, but Selma envy is the idea that the modern American mythology holds the civil rights movement in high esteem, as it should.
As it should. Yeah.
But I can remember back when gay marriage was starting to become a real issue, having a conversation with a younger friend of mine, a colleague of mine at the newspaper. And he was saying, our generation missed the civil rights movement. This is our civil rights movement. Well, if they can invest the BLM or LGBT with that same sort of passion, they see themselves as being the successor to the civil rights movement, which is one of the finest moments of American history.
So Rod, my card's on the table here. I mean, I graduated high school in 91, and I specifically remember, and that was me, when I was 16, 17, 18 years old, I had serious Selma envy. Like, I had really thought that the great battles, that we could sort of stand up and be righteous about had been sort of done. And I was sad in a weird almost kind of nostalgic for something that wasn't even mine, but I was really prone to that narrative, and so it's amazing to me that Selma envy still exists in 2021.
Sure. People, I think what it is too is so many people today, and this is a Hannah Arendt point from the origins of totalitarianism, they're divorced from each other, they're separated from their institutions, they're atomized, they're alienated, and they're desperate for something to give them meaning and solidarity and purpose. And, I think this is just a sign.
Cue social media.
Right.
And we all just can do it performatively from the comforts of our couch.
Yeah, I just saw the first episode of a new documentary about Q. I don't know, Amazon Prime, I think it was. Okay. My son Matt showed it to me. And it's amazing. It's the same kind of thing, Kale. I've been watching the QAnon phenomenon from a distance, just reading about it in the newspapers like everybody else. But this documentary really got into it, and you can see the buttons it's pushing. It's making people feel that they are on the inside of something huge. And I can remember when I was, 12, 13, I'd read The Late Great Planet Earth, the End Times, Hal Lindsey thing, and I took it seriously. I was a kid, right? But I can remember waking up in the morning and reading the newspaper at the breakfast table in the summertime, and reading the headlines and trying to think, what is the prophecy angle here? That I know it was a Gnosticism, It's like my parents don't know that the end of the world is here, but I know. And so, I get the power of that sort of thing, but I believe that there's some of that playing out in BLM and these ideological movements. And again, Hannah Arendt said, this is what happens in a pre-totalitarian society. I want to bring up one more thing, Kale, if I can, about along those lines. One of the things that surprised me in researching Live Not By Lies about the pre-totalitarian Russia was the degree to which Satanism was a big deal there. Not, as far as I could find, ritual Satanism, but the idea of holding Satan up in a big R romantic sense. The idea that here is the rebel that we need to pay attention, we need to honor, we need to esteem. It was a big thing in elite culture. Well, that came to mind the other day when Lil Nas X, that rapper who had the one was it the Old Town Road song?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
God, it sounds like an elderly man saying that.
That Old Town song that we love so much.
Monorail. Anyway, so this jackass comes out with the new song. He's gay. He came out as gay a couple of years ago. Yeah. The new song about how excited he is to be in lust, but it's really satanic. Literally satanic. The theme of the video, where he does a lap dance on Lucifer and then positions himself to be the passive partner in gay sex with the devil.
Lord have mercy.
And at the same time, he signs off on a release of some Satan sneaker, that has some blood in it.
Yeah, like it's part of the sort of the whole sneakerhead phenomenon, right? It's a sort of a limited release. I think there's 666.
They've already sold out
pairs of sneakers, right? With I think there's got a drop of human blood in the paint, all kinds of crazy stuff. Right?
Okay, so here's the problem. Whenever conservatives and Christians complain about this stuff, people will be like, you're such an old pawpaw and all that. I get it. The thing is, Satan is real. If you're a Christian, you believe he's real. I believe he's real. Aside from that, I see this as just another sign of deep transgressive decadence of the sort that Arendt said was a precursor to major political upheaval. It was also happening in Germany, too. I mean, the Nazis were so deeply into the occult. They were serious about it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like, this Arendt business is so interesting to me. And we're really talking about the sort of the Weimar decadence, right? And which is you see it okay, right.
There we are. Origins of Totalitarianism.
It's a great book, but we're really talking about this sort of this culturally decadent exhaustion. And so that, I mean, honestly, on the one hand, like if I'm being a kind of a highbrow critic of this, I'm just sort of being like, yawn, really, Lil Nas, you're doing the Satan thing. Like it seems so, late Madonna or something. And, but I'm an old jaded person who, can sniff the marketing, angle from a mile away. But I think what you're getting at, Rod, is that whether or not you and I think that, is Lil Nas really a Satanist? You're like, probably not. Like, that's not even really the point. The point is opening yourself up to this sort of this exhausted, transgression that is more of an indicator of just how, I want to say pathetic we are. But that this is just a sort of a strange, I don't know, I'm sounding like a Marxist today, but like late capitalist, but
you're right.
Exhaustion.
Right. The thing is, though, if Lil Nas X really wanted to be transgressive, he would have showed himself sexing Hitler or a Klansman in a hood. Yeah. But of course, he doesn't do that because Christians are the eternal enemy. And he went on to say, he put out a statement saying that this is his way to get back at Christians who, when he was young, telling him that he was going to hell. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. So you're going to show them that they were wrong to say you were going to hell because you're gay by
going
making a
down
video
on Satan in hell. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I do think too, back in January, I found this online. Lil Nas X gave an interview to NPR, which he said, I know my audience is mostly kids. And he said, I'm cool with that. Well, of course, he's not cool with that, but they are mostly kids because of Old Town Road. And now the next big thing he's done is this gay sex with Satan video. And to hear that come out of my mouth.
I know.
Could you imagine if we went back like 30 years ago and told people, hey, in 2021, guess what's going to be one of the most popular videos in the country?
I'm laughing here again because I don't want to feel like crying on screen. But I mean, it's sad. I mean, it's sad. It's so derivative. There used to be a point like when I was a kid. I'm sure when you were a kid, like like a song was a song, and the it wasn't a commercial. Or at least it wasn't originally a commercial until all the baby boomers sold out and made tons of money selling their songs for commercials for Coke and whatnot. But seriously, that art sort of was art. And this is so just clearly, this is like a marketing ploy, like for him, like I don't know if it's like to make so that he gets more Instagram followers. I mean, it just seems so, I don't know, just dumb. But I never I think that the point you bring up about the kids, he's and he's really connected to one you said earlier. They are hungry for your children, and I say that with no irony. I mean, I think they really do want that. And while he might think it's hilarious, to sort of open yourself up to Satan, quote unquote, you and I both agree, that we are always in a battle against the powerful forces that would take us down, and opening yourself up even a little bit to those sorts of things is not good.
Yeah, even if you're doing it ironically, you don't really mean it.
Right.
It's not ironic to the enemy. And look, if you've, I wonder if we'll ever have a chance to bring an actual exorcist onto this podcast, because I've interviewed them.
You've talked to them,
with them on things, and look, it's not a joke. It really isn't. I take lots of crap on my blog.
Yeah, you really do. Yeah.
But that's fine because it's not a joke. I'm telling you, I've seen this stuff. One thing too that I wanted to talk about while we still had some time, and we're talking about cultural collapse. I read a fascinating book the other day, and I really want to recommend it to everybody who's listening. It's called Radical Hope: Ethics in the Face of Cultural Devastation. I'll repeat that. Radical Hope: Ethics in the Face of Cultural Devastation, by a man named Jonathan Lear, Lear. And what it's about is about this Indian chief called Plenty Coups, Coups, Plenty Coups. And coup is used in the sense that, like if you've done a great deed, you've really carried off a coup.
You pulled off a coup, yeah.
Pulled off a coup. Well, Plenty Coups was the last great chief of the Crow Nation. And he's a significant figure He was born in the 1840. Yeah, I'm looking at this. 1848 and died in 1932. As a boy, he had a vision because the Crow men, they would go off into the woods to dream. They would fast and then dream, and they believed that God spoke to them through dreams.
Some sort of initiation process, like
for
I boys to become men, or
no? I think that he was 9 years old when he did it. I don't know if this is part of an initiation, but he did it. And one of the things they would do, because they believed that you had to sacrifice to get the attention of God, and some of these men would cut off their digits, part of their finger. And there was one guy from Washington who worked with the Indians who said that, it was common to find no Crow men of a certain age with all their fingers intact.
Wow.
Anyway, 9 years old, Pliny Coos goes out and chops off his finger, and he has this vision. And the vision showed him that a dream showed him that the buffalo were all going to go away. They were all all the Indians were going to be conquered by the white man. But if they listened to the wisdom of the chickadee, the bird, the chickadee, they would be able to survive. Well, in Crow symbology, in Crow iconography, the chickadee is a small bird, but he's very, very clever. And he lives and he triumphs by listening to others and figuring out, using his wits, not his strength.
Sure.
And he took, Pliny Coos took this back as a child to the tribe. The elders interpreted the dream and said, yeah, this is what's going to happen to us. So what did this mean? This meant that when the white man came, the Crows said that it's been foretold we can't resist them. So, but if we can figure out how to work with them, then maybe we can keep our lands, or at least enough of our lands to still keep our nation together. And so that's what they did. The Crow, their great enemies were the Sioux. There were other tribes too, but the Sioux were their great enemies. And the Crows and the Sioux were slaughtering each other for constant battle. And what the Crow did, they worked with the U.S. government to defeat the Sioux. And they ended up getting a better deal from the government for their tribe. The government still screwed them over. Our government screwed over all the Indians, but they got a better deal. Well, Pliny Coos is very controversial, I'm told, in Indian culture today because he's seen as a collaborator. And you could see that. On the other hand, the Crow were the only ones, they were the ones who made out best because they didn't try to fight a losing battle they knew they would lose. So why does Jonathan Lear in this book, why does he look to Pliny Coos as a hero of his people? He said because Pliny Coos could see that the world of the Crow was collapsing. The whole culture was collapsing. And what's interesting about this is Jonathan Lear says that the idea of the Crow subject collapsed. He means that the Crow understood himself and herself to be a Crow by participating in warfare. The entire culture was built around warfare, both men and women. Well, the U.S. government put a stop to that. And so they didn't know how to understand themselves as people, as Crows, absent warfare. So what Pliny Coos did, he led the transition from them being a warring people, because he knew that there was no future in that, to being farmers. And he provided a way for them to think about what it meant to be a courageous Crow, male or female, in this new set of circumstances. But it was incredibly painful because there's a line in here, I'm going to see if I can find it, where Pliny Coos said he's giving his biography before he died. He was talking to a white man about it. And he said that after the buffalo went away, nothing happened. Well, of course things happened. But what he's saying, Jonathan Lear interprets him as saying that after this happened, the thing that defined them as a people, nothing meaningful to Crows happened. Wow. So the reason I'm so fascinated by this is that he's talking about what happens when your culture collapses and all the things that tell you what it means to be a man, a person, a Christian, in our case. When all those markers go away, what do you do? How do you survive? And he sees Pliny Coos as offering a kind of a model for that. So the reason I find that so interesting is because so many of us Christians today we don't even see the cultural devastation around us. I mean, we live in a society, to go back to Lil Nas X for a second, where it's considered clever marketing to show Satan sodomizing a singer, right? And that's an extreme example.
But nonetheless.
But think of all the other things. Now we're having to deal with schools teaching pre-kindergartners about that there's no such thing as male and female. All of these things are happening at once. It's coming over us like the coming of the white man to the Indian lands with all the armor and the guns that the white man had. It seems that there's almost no way to resist this. So what we have to do, and this is my idea behind the Benedict option, is we're not going to defeat it. We've got to figure out ways to hold on to the things that make us who we are through this long winter. Some people call that defeatist, though. So what do you think?
Well, I think I struggle. I mean, obviously, the story of Plenty Coup is absolutely fascinating, and my mind goes to the same place, right? As we witness and watch all of those things that I always sort of took for granted, for sure, the good and the bad, but just like the stuff, right? The stuff of our culture, as you see them get eroded really quickly, right? I mean, it's one thing to sort of like file something down, meticulously and slowly and just over time, and you can make but it just the quickening of the disillusion is so serious to me. I always say, look, we need to take people seriously when they start talking about dismantling things. Like, they actually mean it. They don't mean let's accommodate with these forces of evil. They as the people in the Loudon Facebook page pointed out, like, I don't even have to be nice or talk to these people anymore. They're bad. They're bad guys, right? They're evil guys. And so so I don't know. I take the threat very seriously, but I'm left sort of wondering, all right, what are ultimately the essential things, right? I think about this as a Christian husband and Christian father, a Christian educator. What really are the most important things, that I need to make sure I hold on to. I'm always reminded of that exercise, right? Maybe you played this before, but if the fire alarms go off in the middle of the night, what do you grab? Beside your kids, and I don't want to be overly dramatic about it, but I kind of feel like the fire alarm is going off in the middle of the night, and I barely have time to put on a robe and grab my kids and maybe a couple of items as I'm heading out of a burning house. I mean, is that overwrought? Is that overwrought? Or?
No, it's not overwrought. But let me make this a little more concrete here. This is a quote from Lear's book. He's talking about one manifestation of the cultural collapse for the Crow, the fate of the sun dance, S-U-N dance. The sun dance was an important religious ritual for the Crow because it was connected to their militaristic culture. Right. Now, this is a quote from Jonathan Lear. He says, "To take one example we've already encountered, the sun dance, being a prayer for revenge, was naturally saturated with military episodes. What is one to do with the sun dance when it is no longer possible to fight? Roughly speaking, a culture faced with this kind of devastation has three choices. 1, keep dancing even though the point of the dance has been lost. The ritual continues, though no one can any longer say what the dance is for. 2, invent a new aim for the dance. The dance continues, but now its purpose is, for example, to facilitate good negotiations with whites, usher good weather for farming, or restore health to a sick relative. Or 3, give up the dance. This is an implicit recognition that there's no longer any point in dancing the sun dance." What the Crow did, they gave up the dance for like 65 years. And then when they tried to revive it, nobody was alive who remembered how it went. They had to go to the Shoshone tribe to ask them, what was your sun dance like? So it died. Now, we don't have a similar... We have a similar situation, not precisely, but when I read that, I thought about the polling that was done a couple of years ago about how few Catholics understood what the Eucharist was.
Yeah,
I mean,
that was exactly where I was going in my head.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
All right.
Go ahead.
So I mean, there must be evangelical Protestant. They must have their own version of this too, and Orthodox. But the Eucharist is, what do the Catholics say? It's the summit of the faith.
The source and summit. Thomas Aquinas, source and summit.
Okay. All right. So if we have, I think it was something like, was it 68%? Some crazy number of Catholics, young Catholics, don't even understand that it's the body and blood of Christ. They don't know what it is.
I believe it's higher than that, Rod. Actually.
Okay, so Kale,
I'll take the hit on that one, but I'm pretty sure it's higher than 68%.
Okay, so let me ask you, taking the analogy of the Sundance, I mean, the Sundance went away because they couldn't fight anymore, right? And the Sundance had no meaning outside of a non-militaristic culture. Well, that's not quite what the Eucharist is here, but similarly, it is about forgetting what the thing is for.
Well, look, I absolutely, and look, like one of the major fights that you see amongst the various tribes of Catholicism right now, roughly speaking, there are three camps. There's a sort of the modernist, liberal progressive camp, sort of a Spirit of Vatican II camp. You've got this sort of this middle group. We would call them sort of conservatives. The sort of John Paul II, Benedict XVI camp, and then you have a once quite small, but I think really quite growing trad camp that wants to scrap all of the sort of the liturgical advances or whatever you want to call them from the Paul VI Mass and go back to the traditional Latin Mass, right? And it is fascinating as I sort of graph this onto your three options here. Clearly, the liberal progressive wing of the church has decided that the dance means something else, right?
Yeah, they want to take it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's no longer the holy sacrifice of the Mass. It's about creating community, right? And I got into a scrap on Twitter just two weeks ago with a group of people who were a group of sort of modernist progressive types who were very excited that the Pope had apparently, you never know with our current Pope, whether like he is saying it or his minions are saying it, and like what does he really think about it? It's all a mess, right? But we live in the go make a mess pontificate, and his words, by the way, not mine. And has banned the saying of quote unquote private masses in all the various side chapels in St. Peter's. I'm sure you read about this story, Rod. Mm-hmm. And the liberal progressive sort of Twitterati were all aglee about this and super excited about it. And finally, those nasty baddies who want to say, private masses with their backs turned to the congregation will no longer be able to do this, and it's a threat to Vatican II that they were even still allowed to do it. And besides, saying a mass by yourself is like masturbatory. And I just remember I saw that in and you may have seen me comment on this, and I just like that so misses the theology of the Mass, even in its newer instantiation. Like that misses the whole. It's the holiest thing that we do. Like the Mass is something that the priest offers for all of us. It's not him performing or something. Anyway, it was really a crass.
Let me ask you this though. Okay, so that's the libs. That's what they're doing. They're trying to redefine. So I guess the trads would be those who keep doing the Sundance, even though people don't really know what it's for. Now the trads obviously know what it's. They know what the Mass is for. Yeah. But what I'm curious about is there's such a small number of them, and will the Mass continue? Let's assume the libs don't prevail. But if people don't really understand what the Mass is for, if we don't pass on that living tradition as opposed to just a set of here's what the book says it's for, that's the thing that concerns me, because you can't pass on a tradition if it's only in the books. It has to be lived. This is one of the things that I got from reading this great book called How Societies Remember by Paul Connerton, a sociologist. I wrote about this in Benedict Option. He went around, he was a Marxist. He died a couple years ago, but he was a Marxist who just was curious to know about how traditional societies kept their traditions alive in the face of modernity, just dissolving everything.
Of course.
And one of the things he said was, they all have to have a common ritual, a ritual that doesn't vary. It takes them out of time. It is understood to take them out of time. It involves telling their sacred story, and it involves their body, using their body. Yeah. I mean, this is what the Mass does. This is what the Divine Liturgy does.
Yeah.
But it has to be lived outside of just that ritual.
Right. And I would say that, to me, the strongest arguments that, again, roughly speaking here, the strongest arguments that the traditionalists in my church have is that the traditional Latin Mass is, in fact, a connection to our ancient traditions, right? Mm-hmm. And that the Mass, as it was done, was very clear about what it was and what it was doing. And look, but what they don't catch. So in other words, the way that you pray ultimately creates a people, right? We were talking about that Lerman book. I really do believe that. I think that is very accurate, right? So that the theological mess that we find ourselves in, right? That over 68% of Catholics don't know that it's the holy sacrifice of the Mass, that it's not, that the Eucharist is actually Jesus. Mm-hmm. That, I think, is a direct result of bad liturgy. And I don't think that's a controversial point, in my opinion. It's so clearly the case. Okay. But what I also am a little bit leery of, an over-romanticization of the Latin Mass.
Exactly.
Right?
I mean, the Latin Mass doesn't, it's not self-justifying in the sense that, a lot of trads, I remember this from my years as a Catholic, they think it's so obviously better that if all you need to do is see it and boom, you're right there. You'll become a Latin Mass traditionalist. And it's just not true.
Yeah, it's not true. Although, look, I mean, again, in a knife fight, I'm probably at this point in my life, I'm going to side with the trads, and I would argue that we probably would be better served if we would retreat back to our origins. But anyway, that's a pragmatic
agree, but the
argument.
Point is, it can't be just this
LARPing
cult. When I say cult, I mean, you know what I'm saying. That. It's the same with Orthodoxy. You have some Orthodox who see the protecting the tribe and the tribe's traditions as the point of it, as opposed to living the gospel out. And so that you've had some this influx of converts into Orthodoxy who are like, no, this is not just for the Russians or the Greeks. But I think that to think about what Plenty Coups did, he knew that they were never going to be able to keep all their land. He was not romantic or gullible about the white people and what they were going to do, but he was just trying to get the best deal he could for his people. And they, as I mentioned earlier, it turns out they did better, the Crow did, than the other tribes. So the reason I connect this to the Benedict option is that one of the things that ticks a lot of Christians off about the Benedict option is, as I said earlier, they see it as defeatist. They see it as settling for living on a reservation, so to speak.
And I think that's it's interesting. It really is the way. Again, you run into these folks online and they want to fight, and we need to take the fight to them, and I don't think that they're being honest in they're not being honest or full in their assessment of the route.
Exactly. It's like Sitting Bull, the great Chief Sitting Bull. He was a rival of Plenty Coups, and he was chief of the Sioux, and he wanted to keep fighting, and he thought that they could prevail. And Plenty Coups was going on a religious vision. He believed that God and his tribe believed that God had really shown to them that you're not going to make this. And it turned out to be true. And Plenty Coups, by the way, was baptized Catholic in 1917.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. But in any case, and the Sioux, Sitting Bull, they were incredibly brave, but they were doomed. And I believe, too, that for us Christians, living in a different set of circumstances.
Yeah.
I think if we think we're going to, as like some of our evangelical friends say, take America back for Christ, that's not going to happen in our lifetime.
Right. Right.
The way I see it is do the best we can to get our quote unquote reservations and prepare for the future when we can go back, not with guns and knives, but
sure.
keep evangelizing. Don't stop evangelizing. But as Robert Louis Wilkin, the great church historian, wrote in First Things in this great 2004 essay called "The Church as Culture," he said there is no more important task for the church now than to remind itself of its story, because our connection to our story, our Christian story, has grown so thin. And I think that's absolutely true. And the forces arrayed against us are immense. And if we can't tell ourselves our own story, then our kids are going to forget what the Sundance is, so to speak.
Right. Yeah, and I think that this gets back to the whole CRT thing, right? The CRT thing has a way of cannibalizing all of the narrative and taking it completely over. And, you and I both talked about it's really important that folks understand that the CRT movement does not carry forward the work of the civil rights movement. It's a new thing. It's a kind of Trojan horse type thing. And I think we have to be really actively cautious about letting it find purchase in our churches and certainly in our schools, because it's going to be a rival. It's a rival ideology, if that makes sense.
Oh, it absolutely makes sense.
And
go ahead.
And I as I chew on this Plenty Coup motif here, the story, it's really worth chewing on more in terms of how we see those analogous situations to what appears to me, and I think appears to you, as the old dispensation is no longer operable in some very real way.
Some very real way. And I think that as CRT marches through the churches, the parachurch organizations, and LGBT rights does too, and splits them right down the middle, as is happening right now, that's going to become even clearer. This one of the young men I was talking about earlier, the college students, said that at his school there was a ministry he's involved in, a Christian ministry, that had made some kind of statement critical of homosexuality, something very mild. I ended up looking this up online, and the guy was telling me the honest story. And he said that there was suddenly this huge outrage on campus that a Christian ministry would say that, people trying to kick it off campus. Mm-hmm. And the guy said that they're having people resign from the ministry, young college students, because they don't want to be associated with it. Now, whether
because it's a stain.
Yeah, it's a stain, and they want to protect their own options. And the same guy was telling me that. He said, I have to tell you, I feel ashamed of some of the things I've done this semester. He said, I've been in class and I've said things and participating in classroom discussion that I don't believe. He said, I've said lies and I'm embarrassed that I did it. But he said, the reason I did it was because if you don't participate, you're not going to get a good grade. You have to participate. Right. But to say anything that contradicts wokeness, the progressive line, is to invite just this pile on about you're a bigot.
What's incredible to me, Rod, is in college I would never have dreamed of lying in a class conversation in order to get by. Like I didn't have to. I'm not judging these guys. I went to graduate school. I read all the Foucault and Derrida and Gramsci and all this sort of stuff, and I never held back about what I really thought. And I knew I was in some way a kind of one of the freaks in the department. I was polite and I got along with everybody, but they knew that I was different. But I never in a million years would have thought to lie. It's just astounding to me that our young people are being asked to do this, and I get it, but I would ask, this to anybody who clearly these guys were burdened by this. Like they had to sort of tell you that I know that I love your book called Live Not by Lies, but I've been doing it and I don't feel right about it. And, this is, don't lie, and how long, how long can you do the Ketman game? That you talk about, how long can you tell the lie in order to get along with the regime, right? And it's astounding to me that we're here. And I think that's exactly what your book is getting at. Yeah, like this is not some like far off future. It's literally happening right now. People are practicing Ketman in the middle of a university, for God's sakes, Rod.
Yeah.
I mean, the one place where you're supposed to be able to go and try out ideas and have them go up against other ideas and duke it out and figure out what you really think is true. These kids are already in this sort of weird headspace where they're not trying to figure out what's true. They're trying to figure out, how do I get by? How do I get through this? And talk about a corrupt regime. I mean, talk about a world order that is divorced from the sacred order, right? And I think that what your book talks about, what you blog about, is that, look, there is such a thing as a sacred order, whether you think it is or not, and you have a responsibility to find it.
Well, I saw a tweet today from Jessica Hooten Wilson, the literature professor. She said that she quoted William James as saying the whole divide between secular and religious worldview is there's an unseen order and a seen order. Which one shall predominate?
Right.
And for Christians living in and Muslims too, and Jews too, living in this world today, the seen order is trying to extinguish the unseen order. It doesn't want détente. It wants to crush it. Just before you and I came on, Kale, and I know we're having to wind down now, but before I came on, I was talking to a friend of mine, a Protestant friend who is he's not a pastor, but he's a leader in a big parachurch organization. He said that just today he spoke to a guy he knows who's usually very optimistic. He's involved in a lot of church management things at a very high level. And he said that his friend told him they believe that within a year, they can expect a lot of hostile actions against conservative churches from the Biden administration. And the guy, my friend, was saying that, to hear this man, whom I know is always be super cheerful, always looking on the bright side, to hear him say that, to hear him explain why. I mean, this is not just some opinion of some guy. This is the guy whose business it is to watch this stuff, to watch the law, to watch the politics, to protect the church. And they're starting to, this man was starting to recommend things churches need to do to prepare themselves for what's coming. And again, it's not some theory. It's happening right now.
Yeah. Yeah, we're seeing it's being laid out. No, that's the thing. And you asked the riffing on McIntyre at the end of After Virtue. It's like, at what point do you say, you know what? I just don't think I can play a part in the regime.
Nope.
That it's time.
Not going to shore up this empire.
That's right. That's the line I keep going back to, is like, and those two guys that you talk to, that's the question they're asking themselves, right?
Yeah.
And all of us hope that that's like a generation away, or like that's not going to happen on my watch. All of us hope that we can get to retirement before we have to really worry about these things, and we may just be the lucky ones, quote unquote, the lucky ones that get to live through all of this. And but it seems like it's there. And you referenced the Hannah Arendt earlier. What is going on? And I mean, to me, the Loudoun County situation and this Facebook situation. I mean, I know it might sound comical, but when you look into it, how is this not pre-totalitarian? I mean, really, this is not the government, right? I mean, it's partly but these are other parents.
Yep, using their power to smash, and it's I don't want to open this up again, but I'm just going to say this right now. Okay, a book that I recommend to a lot of people, "The Final Pagan Generation" by the historian Edward J. Watts, Watts. It's about the pagans in the 4th century Rome, who the last generation raised when pagan religion was the dominant religion of Rome. And Watt says they had no idea that Christianity was about to displace them entirely. And because there were still pagan temples everywhere, even as Christianity during that century was moving further and further to conquer more and more institutions within Roman society, there are still pagan temples everywhere. Rome had been pagan for time out of mind. They thought it can't happen here. And it did. As Christians, we would say, thank God it did. But still, we can learn from that you should never, ever, ever be complacent and think that because it has always been this way, it always will be this way.
Yeah. No, I mean, because there are plenty of former Christian strongholds, around the Mediterranean that, were Christians before Europeans were Christian. And
where's the Bishop of Hippo today?
Right. No, that's exactly right. So, lest we get too sort of comfy and say, well, the gates of hell will not prevail against the church, the Christian church. Well, it can close some places down, however, and what makes us think that that we've made some sort of special deal that we get to skip history. I don't know.
Well, Kale, once again, listening to you talk, the future's so bright. I gotta wear shades, baby.
Yeah. Oh, look, I see the glasses. You finally got the glasses. All right.
Yeah.
All right, well, on that note, send us off, please, Rod.
Okay. Don't get nothing on you.
All right, Uncle Bubba. Take care. All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.